So my first question for all the panel members, so you can each answer this as you wish and in whichever order, so it's kind of like speak first. What value do you place on books in this age of swirling misinformation, artificial intelligence, fragmenting media? So who'd like to go first?
Todd's looking at me. And Charlotte. Well, I think if there was a choir to preach to about books, it would be this room. So in some ways, it's to affirm what we all know about books and their permanence, their place as physical objects. But I think partly in a world where that civic pressure that's coming from artificial intelligence, a much more disrupted and fractured public sphere, where there's an inundation of all kinds of information, the kinds of things we'll come to value increasingly will be those things that have clear provenance, where we know where the knowledge comes from, where we have trust, and where we can place, and out of that trust comes authority. And so books in the future will be almost like rocks in the river. They'll occupy spaces from which we can navigate an increasingly uncertain and treacherous world around them. And I think that's part of the reason that books that speak to the present, like the texts, are so critically important at moments like this. So apart from all those other things we love about books, that's going to be the future of books. And that includes whether or not they're digital or physical, I think.
Thank you, Dale. Rebecca.
And Macfie, Charlotte. To all of that, I scribbled a few kind of random words down. Permanence was one.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I agree, it doesn't matter whether it's digital or a physical book. And you know this as a writer too, there's something about when you write a book, for me personally, you know that this physical presence of this thing that you and the editors and the publisher that you're working with is creating is going to be on library shelves for probably a long time, unless it's really bad, I suppose, and they might throw it out. So that gives you, so there's a gravity about books, whether they're fiction or non-fiction, that permanence creates, and I find that reassuring, precious, and grave, I suppose. Particularly also in today's incredibly disaggregated media with news cycles that, they literally happen before your eyes, really. You see something on one of the major news sites and then go back to sort of have a look at it again or send it to somebody else. It's already dropped off the bottom of the screen. Books are the assured place for true depth, and when we're faced with existential crises across multiple spheres, not just climate, but also extreme obscene inequality, a housing crisis that we here at least cannot get on top of, books are the place where a writer and a publisher can grapple with the multiple taproots that feed into a complex problem and help us start to see where we might go to emerge out the other side. I think I love your rocks in the river image. I think I feel that. Yeah, I think that's me. Yeah.
Cool. Becky.
Just before we were waiting for the panel, I was telling some of these guys that I used to work in geography, and I'm looking at my good friend Amanda at the back there, who was my colleague there, and there was this beautiful map books in geography, and we used to use them as Christmas paper, actually. So books can be really, really fabulous for Christmas wrapping. I didn't know if I would survive that comment because everyone around me kind of looked aghast, but the other reason I think books are really good that they're for the most part considered. You know, the notion of slow scholarship, I think, is really important. Things that have been mused over, thought about over a long time, thought about with editors and other readers, can kind of create really fruitful stuff that lasts, and that is not this kind of quick fire information that we get from other sources. So I think that's pretty critical when it comes to thinking about books.
Thank you. Tom, does a publisher put value on books?
Hopefully, yeah. Look, I think in terms of the question of the value of books, I think the presence of you all here this evening is really testament to that, and it's I just really want to mihi to you all and to say how much myself as the publisher for the series and Bridget and the team at BWB really appreciate you all being here this evening. It's fantastic and a real affirmation for the series and where we've got to date. I think all the things that have been shared are really interesting for me. I track AI, I work a bit with AIs. We're actually using AI a little bit at work at the moment with our library metadata and public data, but it's something I'm tracking a lot, and my mind often turns to books and sort of what I think of as this idea of something like the sovereignty of a book. And by that I mean that I think a book has got boundaries, it's manifestly got borders, it's got limits, both physically and even online. There's the boundary of the page. It's got boundaries in terms of where the author is seeking to write and where the end of the narrative sits and where their expertise goes to and where it extends to and where it ends. It's also, I think, got boundaries in terms of what a writer and a publisher will set out as to how a book might be engaged with and how it might be approached. And that can be set out in terms of things like a preface, an introduction, a glossary perhaps. There is sort of the apparatus there for a writer and for a publisher to sort of set out how a book is to be approached in the world. And I think that for me is a really distinctive quality with books, and it's something, Bridget's always said to me, you can do anything you want with a book, Tom, so long as you explain what it is that you're doing. And it's not something I always quite get right, but I'm working on it. But I think that for me is where a lot of the magic sits in a book, that you can work with an author and realize that vision for a book and do it on the terms that work for an author and the vision of what that book is trying to do. And I think that's something for me that I hold to, because I think that's something that is distinctive in comparison to sort of other media forms that are out there. It's something that has a particular value, I think, for books. And I think it's something that, to some extent, we've been successful with the text series. I think people have been able, from quite early on, way back in 2013, when we first launched it, people could identify quite readily what we're seeking to do with the series. We're short books on big subjects. We're trying to make them accessible, trying to price them in a way that would bring a readership through. And people identified with that, and authors have identified with that, which has been tremendous. And I think many of the best submissions that we've had have come from authors who have sort of grasped, seen that vision, seen what we're trying to do with the book. And one that's always come to mind for me has actually been Wellbeing Economics by Paul Dalziel and Caroline Saunders, where and Jeff Walker, who's here this evening, will recall this, where they just came through with this wonderfully sort of fully formed proposal for a book that I think could have otherwise been esoteric or obscure for some, but they got what we were trying to do with the series and did a book on wellbeing economics of all things, and it sold and sold and sold and found a fantastic readership. And so I think, for me, I think seeing that affirmation for what the book as a form, as a creative form, is trying to do, and seeing that sort of that survive and flourish in many ways with the series is tremendous, and gives me hope for the future when you look at the swirling world of AI and everything else that's out there.
Thank you. So there are 100 texts now out there, so I'm going to ask the panel an incredibly difficult question. Is there a text that has made a particular impact on you, and why? Only one. Damon.
I thought we were going in order, but we better be, Charlotte.
We are at this moment, at this time.
Well, I probably will think the one that that I've found most compelling and has created the biggest current in the river as imagining decolonisation. So I'm not just blowing smoke in this direction, but I think a really significant work. And I think that where the texts have been really valuable is either they work as kind of distillations or provocations, and they can be both.
Yep.
And many of the subjects that we approach are very difficult to get reliable entry points to big subjects. And so having, whether it's wellbeing economics or child poverty, people want a trustworthy place to begin, but one that doesn't just sort of blandly act as a summary, I guess. And so imagining decolonisation sort of probed the field in a bunch of ways. The multi-author ones work quite differently to the single-author ones. And I think it was really, I used it in a classroom back then. I was in a classroom occasionally. And it really resonated with quite diverse groups of students.
Yep.
And I think the other thing, and the cost is a really important part of it, that if you have an audience that you want to speak to and the barrier is $40, $50, $60, that is a really significant barrier. And a $15, $20 entry point is actually a really special opportunity to reach people who wouldn't otherwise be readers. I mean, that's what people pay for magazines now. And so there's a sense of permanence that doesn't come with a magazine. There's a seriousness and a depth of thinking that comes into those works, and you see all those good qualities in imagining decolonisation. And some of the other multi-author ones, I know you said one, but I did look. Maui Street and I Tangata brought together those things that were otherwise seen as ephemeral, and they make present the author in a way that I think isn't true of the internet. And so I had first-hand encounters of using imagining decolonisation in those spaces. It changed the way that mostly young people felt about that term and how they could use it, and deeply empowered them.
Well, I think that Damon did a really, really clever job then of going beyond the one. Because I thought I was just going to have to go like, Charlotte, I'm just not following the instruction because it's too hard. So you did a tricky one. So I have, I thought about this before. I thought, I can't answer that question. And you've got your big one and a few others there. So for me, I scanned across my shelf this morning and I came to, and I'll try and explain why for each one. Rafe Chapman, Time of Useful Consciousness, was really important for me. I was doing a lot of climate writing at the Listener at the time, and it created a framework of a sort of a rational analysis for urgency, and created this beautiful parallel about the period of time in which you can take rational action with urgency before things cascade, before the plane starts to dive, because it was actually an aviation concept. That one's always stayed with me a lot. Every time I think I go anywhere near writing about climate issues, I know that that's with me. Melania and I was just a whole education. I didn't know anything about the Polynesian Panthers. I didn't know anything about the movement. It put a whole lot of bits and pieces together for me, about the Dawn Raids, about that second-generation Pacifica migrant, second-generation Pacifica community. I found it just a beautiful education, and I loved personal story through it, and I just felt that one worked beautifully as a single author piece that was both really intensely emotional and but also just brought me this fantastic education and a big piece of ignorance that I and the third one I wanted to mention, well, two actually. Sorry. I said, you got away.
But I got away with it.
Paola Tapsell and Peter Mahana, Privilege and Perpetuity, I think is fantastic. I've made a lot of people read that book. It's a critical tool right now to arm yourself with. Brings it all, and Kāinga I just found just incredibly moving. Really helped me a lot to understand the wounds, and also the lines of history back through the individualisation of title, and that is the raupatu by the pen. So yeah, all just huge education. Oh.
Well, I keep to the rules and just pick one. No, there are many, but the one that I've picked is Alice Tapunga Somerville's one, 250 Ways to Start a Captain Cook Essay, and I read it a while ago, and I thought, this is not how you write a book, is it? So it's very different from the other texts as far as I can see. And there's three reasons why really that book had an impact on me. And the first one was she very cleverly conveys the ubiquitousness of colonisation and just the way in which it's impacted on so many different places and people and in so many different ways and at different scales. And I think she does that really cleverly through that book. And the second point is really a kind of catharsis that as an Indigenous academic one might feel reading it, because there's lots of she takes opportunity to, I guess, call out some of the micro-racism and microaggressions she's experienced as an academic across different institutions and academia in general, and not just her, but her whānau and all sorts of other things, other people and friends through her kind of experience writing the book, which seems to span quite a few years. And the third one, I had a look at it again over the weekend, and the first entry is about a conference talk she did where pretty much no one turns up. So there's, I think, her and the panel chair and one person, other person or something. It just made me laugh, because I was telling someone before, I went to do a talk in the Gold Coast, which is pretty cool, last week, and when me and the Aboriginal woman were speaking on this panel, half the audience left. And so only a few people left when I started speaking here, so that's pretty good. But it just made me realise that experience is felt by others, and it was pretty kind of a pretty sort of dispiriting experience, and one might read all sorts of things into it, like they wanted to go for a swim because it's 33 degrees outside, or it was racism, and I'm going to go for the latter probably, but the book is really great at highlighting in a really easy to read and lovely kind of lyrical way what it feels like, I guess, to be an Indigenous academic in Aotearoa. Yeah.
Tom, I don't know, this question is a little bit like asking which of your children you like the most.
Yeah.
Which would be a terrible thing to ask.
It is a terrible thing to ask.
So I'm going to...
One can't have favourites, but
No.
Your three texts are exactly No, I can't
But
choose
which was
one.
first, Tom?
No, but I think I can choose kind of threads or streams, and I think one interesting thread through the series from the outset has been a thread on sort of public health and science communication, and that really started with Paul Callaghan's text, as you were saying, Charlotte, and so we've had, really from the get-go, we had Paul Callaghan's text, we had a text by Susie Wiles on microbiotic resistance, and Sean Hendy, Nicola Gaston who's here, Neil Pearce, there's a whole Mike Berridge. We had a whole set of texts working right through particularly the first 2/3 of the series on these matters, and many of them commissioned by Jeff Walker. And it kind of came to fruition when in 2018 I commissioned David Skegg to write a book on public health, and published this book. It came out in March 2019, and I remember thinking, David Skegg is an eminent scientist, one of New Zealand's leading scholars, leading epidemiologists, had published with Bridget before, public health is manifestly, a big important issue. But I remember sitting there in 2019 thinking, well, just hope there's a readership for this. And I hope it's sort of, those usual publisher anxieties about hoping a book will have a connection in the world. 12 months later, we all know what unfolds, and we're in that very tough year of 2020, and it was a really tough time for all. And there was this kind of really affirming and powerful moment for me when, in about May, June of that year, I remember working at home with my family, who are here this evening, and we were just fielding constant requests through lockdown for people who wanted access to David Skegg's book on public health and why there needed to be more investment in public health. And we're getting requests for David to be doing Zoom interviews around the country. And it was one of those really good moments in a very tough time where you could see the power of a book across the country and the power of an author across the country, and for me to be able to reflect through the commissioning that had happened through the series that had sort of led to that point. And it was also really affirming that a number of the key voices, particularly through that 2020 time, so Sean Hendy, David Skegg, Susie Wiles, Max Rashbrook, there was a set of people who had contributed to the text series and to BWB's publishing who were significant public commentators through that time. And so, yeah, that's been a really, for me, an interesting part of the series, and it was wonderful to sort of see that flow through.
Where the BWB text really hit the spot.
Yes. Yes.
So, for the panel at large, what text would you like to see in the future?
I'm here taking notes, so.
We'll stick with the Damon goes. Well, the one I really want to see is the one we're launching today as well, which is Judith Binney's one. And I think that's a really special one for me and for many of us because of our connections with Dame Judith and with BWB. And also, I was showing some of her books to my daughters, and they just were quite taken with how big Redemption Songs is and so on. And then I said, oh, this is the one. They go, oh, you can take that one around. You can read it. And I think it's a sign of accessibility and thinking, and having reread it over the weekend before we came, I just thought it's aged really, really well. The essays speak to our moments still, which is a really impressive thing to say. But to the question, I've thought about this. Tom knows one answer to this question because I've been pitching this book to him and Bridget, and now's a really good time to pitch it. That we should have this book, which is called The Last Days of Rugby. We're watching the precipitous decline of rugby, and it may accelerate in 2 weeks' time. I'm pretty sure it will. But I think that's one.
I think it's got an easy market in Australia.
And then and I'm quite serious about that one. I think he should take that one on. But I think the one that may speak to the moment is what happens post October 14th or 15th, and we're learning things about New Zealand's public discourse that are quite instructive about the fracturing of our public sphere, about the deep distrust of expertise and education, the real social and economic challenges of the post-COVID kind of moment. But the one that's kind of resounding through and is being weaponised is this kind of points to something along the lines of a discourse around co-governance and what that means and what it means now and what it will mean whatever happens after October. I think there's that's kind of a sweet spot for Bridget Williams' books to try and explain in a very cogent but also even-handed way a sort of map for the uninitiated.
I think the one I want to see, and there's a few people in the audience here who might accept this commission, not thinking about anybody particular, Ollie Neese and or Max Rashford, but I think we need a really comprehensive taproot analysis of the housing crisis. It's multi-threaded, and I think each of those threads needs to be tracked back through time to find the historical decision making that is compounded to put us where we are now. I think it's it is such a severe crisis, and we're not getting out of it. It's going to get worse, and a lot of facile arguments are put up as to what the cause is. It's land use rules. No, it's not. I mean, it's got a complex, multifaceted history, and I don't think we can begin to have an honest accounting of why we're at where we're at and have honest policy that takes us forward without that. And I think it's quite urgent. I think we're, I don't see it getting anywhere or going anywhere but worse just now.
I would say imagining decolonisation too, but Mike reckons it might be a bit like Rocky 2, which was a flop at the cinemas. So I won't go there. I guess for me, I really enjoy the place-based ones, looking at particular places in whenua and their histories and their futures, and so I'd like to see a bit more of that.
I think the future of the series, I mean, I look in some ways back to the past of it, really. It's I think there's always been these three streams with the text series in terms of contemporary issues, history and memoir, and I think in many ways some of the texts that have ultimately, I think, been most satisfying, certainly to publish, have been the ones that have actually combined all three threads. And actually Damon's has been one of those, where you sort of combine the personal account with the history and then looking hard at some of these contemporary issues. Decolonisation did that. Rachel Buchanan's Kultaunaki Tamonga did that. Melania Nye's The Platform did that. So I'm hoping in the future there's going to be more texts that are combining those three threads. And yes, meantime, there's a whole set of texts for summer which are on the flyers for you on the seats, and the series is continuing into next year and beyond, which is fantastic.
We're kind of at time, Tom, I think, even though the panel would have many more things to say.
Yes. I will thank you to all of you for speaking tonight. I'm about to welcome Bridget Williams up onto the stage, and I just want to personally just acknowledge Bridget for her support of the series. There are many people that have made the series possible, and Bridget's about to acknowledge it, a number of them, but I really want to acknowledge Bridget, and I think most fundamentally her faith in the series, her faith in me, and her faith in the BWB team to keep realising these books has been tremendous and means a heck of a lot. I also had the sobering experience about 5 years into the series when I was rummaging through a publishing file one day and discovered that there was a file note from 1999 from Bridget to herself for a series called Street Talk, which was for short books that were affordable on timely issues. and it was one of those moments where I sat and thought, and it was, Bridget has been down this road before. And but it's, Bridget's ability to have gone down those roads before many times, and the way that she informs the series at all levels is a tremendous source of strength for me as the publisher for the series, and a tremendous source of strength for the series at BWB. And so I just really want to acknowledge Bridget and welcome you to the stage, Bridget.